Rochelle, we have 21 people. Do you want to get started or do you want to wait a little bit longer?
Sure, we can, well, why don't we start? Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Happy Earth Day. And we're going to be listening to a little presentation from Rochelle about climate action at Dalhousie. Just a couple of housekeeping things. You're obviously all muted, but if you have a question or if you have a technical issue, feel free to email me at rethink@dal.ca for technical stuff. But if you have a question, Rochelle will be answering questions throughout the presentation. So feel free to just write those in the chat and I will grab her attention and let her know. And some of the questions she may answer at the end. But yeah, Rochelle, do you want to get started?
Great. Thank you so much, Karina, and welcome everyone. Happy Earth Day. It's our first webinar live, so I'm excited about that. And just wanted to do a shout out to my background. I grew up in Labrador, so these are comforting scenes in the background for me. So welcome. My first slide, I just wanted to say Happy Earth Day and recognize the tragedies around the globe and here in Nova Scotia, and just say Earth Day is a event of love and compassion, and nothing sort of speaks to that greater to me than the beauty of nature. And this is a picture I took at Mersey River area down by Kedgie, one of our national parks. And just a reminder of the beauty and resilience of nature. So just wanted to start off our presentation. The learning objectives for today, I think many people may have a good sense of the science around climate trends. I will just touch on that a tiny bit, but most of the presentations will focus on operational planning and implementation strategies. So what can a large organization do to make some significant headway on climatic change issues, and what do we have in the future? So for today's presentation, just some energy thoughts. So I used kilocalories and I ate breakfast, and that's my office assistant who helped me finish that off, so there was no food wastage with the soya milk in the bowl. And then this presentation is solar powered. That's my back deck. And I currently have this laptop connected to the battery. It is recharging, so using 80 watts, but when not in full mode, it's about 20 watts. And of course, Zoom is offered in the cloud, and some of the software services on my computer are supported by the Dal data center. And so below there's a picture of Jody in ITS and Justin, who is our energy manager. And they worked on a project to reduce the data center consumption by 24% using cold dial containment and energy recovery. And then finally, some of the cloud services are probably provided by servers in Ontario and Quebec or in the United States. And depending their carbon emission related to their electricity grid may be less or more. But one increasing trend that we'll talk about today is the option for renewable energy power purchase agreements. And I know some large companies are starting to make some headway on that, which will start making large shifts in the grid, positive changes. So just a little thought. And of course, it all depends on the total life cycle emission factor for today's presentation. It depends on where you want to start, from the food I ate to the minerals used in the solar panel and the battery to the other energy used. But all this to say is that at Dalhousie, we try to take a deep look at everything and work away on climate change action. So from just a high level, again, there's lots of science documents out there, the IPCC documents, Environment Canada, NOAA. This is kind of my overview. The challenges we're digging up and transforming, so transforming land, which is carbon sink, and burning carbon sinks, so previous land buried in dead animals and plants, we're digging them up and we're burning them at an unprecedented rate. And so that's driven by population, consumption, and technology. Those are some key factors. So what that's doing is we're heating up more, we're keeping more energy in, and that's rapidly changing the planet's climate and ecosystem. So these changes have a number of known and unknown impacts, and strategies that we aim to do to reduce the negative impacts of that is mitigation, so reducing greenhouse gases, and while we prepare for the present reality of those rapid changes happening, which is adaptation. So today's presentation, I'm going to talk about what we're doing from a mitigation point of view and adaptation. So the weather is what you see today, and the climate is the average weather conditions over time. And so, you know, we might have a weather event that is unique. It doesn't mean it's a total climate trend, but if you look at Environment Canada's homepage, you'll notice the weather for today, and then you'll see the averages, and that's related to the averages of climate, which is usually forecasted over a longer period, 10, 20, 30 years. And so because of what is happening now, we're changing that overall condition, that overall climate change average. So in Canada, recent reports released last year, that is, you know, Canada's doubled the rate of global temperature increases because of our situation in the north and snow cover being depleted. And so these rapid changes are having an impact on the biosphere. And so current temperatures are increasing 10 times the rate of warming as compared to an ice age. So that sort of sets it in context of the rapid nature of what's happening. I pulled this these slides from recent document for, well, it was in 2013, but I think the trends are pretty similar, for a presentation I recently gave to the District Health Authority Department on the connection between, you know, the body and earth metaphor, where, you know, the temperatures increasing, ocean content, they're all kind of related, but we were seeing an increased upward scale on humidity and temperature, but there's also non-linear relationships where we get more feedback. Where ice melts, there's less reflection, and it speeds up absorption and more heat production. So not necessarily always linear in the trends. And certainly there's been a lot of conversation and speaking and discussion about the different impacts of climate change, whether it's biodiversity, food security, air quality, and such. And the last slide on the science, but again, feel free, there's lots of content out there, but just some of the health implications of a changing climate in Canada. Of course, these changes may impact people differently depending on where they are. And again, some of the climate modeling would have better information about what are the specific impacts that an area might be faced with. So I want to move on more specifically to Dalhousie University's campuses, founded in 1818, and we have about almost 5.8 million gross square feet of building space. We have 4 campuses, and most of our buildings are connected to district heating systems. So what that means is that we have a heating plant, and then we, through tunnels or buried lines, we provide heat to all the buildings through that mechanism. In Halifax, we also have a cooling facility that provides district cooling for some of the properties as well. And at Dalhousie, today, my focus, our sphere of influence at the university is around operation changes, and we'll talk a bit about what that is, but I did want to recognize that there's a lot of groups and people working on sustainability issues at Dal. So at the top part of your screen, that's where we're the administrative office of sustainability, but at the university, we have a college, we have a student sustainability office, and there's a number of student societies that are working on different aspects of climate change and transportation, food security. And then on the research side, we have over 200 faculty working on research related to sustainability and climate change. And finally, across all the faculties here at Dalhousie, whether it's the School for Resource and Environmental Studies or Environmental Science or Agriculture, Engineering, Law. We have a number of courses that include aspects of sustainability. And we kind of know these numbers because we participate in a sustainable tracking assessment rating system, which is an international rating system for sustainability, where it's transparent. We share information online, and we look at all the aspects of sustainability on campus. So if you're interested more about that reporting system and comparing Dal with other universities, all that data is online as well. And I just wanted to mention that research at Dalhousie is an important concept, and the research clusters at the university have been structured around the UN Sustainable Development Goals. One of them is climate action. And so if you go to the site at Dalhousie, you can click on and see more about different research going on related to climate change and other sustainability aspects. How does our operations connect with research? We do our own applied research, and we also try to think about buildings that support sustainability research, and I'll talk a little more about that as well. So who we are, we're the administrative department. We report to the VP of Finance and Admin. So in some universities and organizations, the sustainability office like us would be in the facilities department. We are separate from facilities, but we work with them regularly, and other departments, faculties, community, and student groups. So that's just Karina, who we've met, and Justin, our energy manager, Scott, who works on transportation, and then Tanya, who's working in our office, is there on the left. And we always have at least 4 to 5 students working in our office in the summer and students throughout the year. So we're a small group, and we'll talk about how do we make change in a meaningful way with a small but mighty group. So our functions that we work on are planning, behavioral initiatives, monitoring, reporting, and project development. And so how we do that work is we have a lot of partnerships with community and government and campuses. We do a lot of applied research with students and engage with student societies. We're the group that does a lot of the planning around creating the climate change plan, sustainability plan, green building policy, trying to change all those systems and then come up with incentives and strategies to follow those systems and standards. So I coined the phrase that we have a green project development approach because we're small. How do we work with other people to leverage resources to make change? And later I'm going to talk about financing strategies of how we do this work so that we can make more impact. So this is the basis of the presentation. This is actually a picture on top of the new Mirror Idea building, and that's the PV system on the top of the design building. We also have PV and a green roof. We have an inverter in the basement, a battery system as well to emulate a microgrid. So this is our largest rooftop solar PV system. So when I was preparing for this presentation, I was thinking, what are the main checklists for an organization if they're working on operational climate change issues? And certainly having a climate change and sustainability plan with targets is an important component because that drives your action and your management goals around what you want to achieve. So that was back in 2010, we released our first climate change plan. And I would say sustainability plan because scope 3 emissions, I'll talk a bit about what those are. But if they're not highlighted in your climate change plan by targets, you can incorporate them in your sustainability plan. I think other checklist fundamentals are board reporting, public accountability, making sure you have an annual greenhouse gas inventory to see how you're making progress on your targets, really looking at your financing strategies. I think one of the key successes that we've had is figuring out financing strategies, putting them into place so that we can move projects along, figuring out a method for project implementation that works, having an accountable department and authority, and making sure that you're connected and networking, have partnerships. So I think if I were somebody would ask me, what are the key checklist items for an organization? Here are some main ones. So in our climate change plan, I mentioned that our first one was in 2010. We updated and have version 2 in 2019. We released that, and it's online, available for anybody to review. The key goals are to reduce greenhouse gases, so back to the mitigation component, adapt to a changing climate, that's our adaptation goals, and increase climate knowledge. Within the operational plan, we remember at a university, of course, we have all the research and teaching and other governance activities that are going on outside of our sort of sphere of influence, and that is all very important work as well. This is just kind of their operational focus here. So in our climate change planning process, this is kind of in the last decade, what did we do to create a climate change plan, to implement projects, and to go to the next level for the next decade? So just put it on a timeline here. You notice in 2009, one of the first things we did was create a sustainability business case model, and that's a financing strategy that I'll talk about. We also engaged the community on campus and off campus. Over 2,000 people over that course of the 10 years or more have participated in surveys and workshops and providing advice on the different strategies. So we've had greenhouse gas reduction strategy workshops, but also adaptation workshops and climate modeling for our campuses. We've produced some papers on that and a number of different research papers over the years on things like, if we were to do a Nova Scotia-based carbon offset strategy, what would it look like? So we've done some recent work on that, and also life cycle fuel assessment of our energy sources. So we continue to do research every year, and ongoing, we do greenhouse gas reporting, sustainability reporting, and planning and implementation, and presentations like this today. So strategies that, if I look at prioritizing climate strategies, one thing over the last decade that we've, been thinking about is that looking at strategies that have co-benefits that are have an adaptation and mitigation benefit. So if you think of something like building envelope, if you have a more resilient building envelope that has less air and water leakage and it has better insulation properties, it's going to have mitigation benefits as well as adaptation, because then you're preparing for, in our climate, which will be warmer, wetter, wilder weather. So more wind, more precipitation in a shorter period of time, and perhaps more extreme events as an example. So we in our climate strategy, you can see how we try to pair things that work together. Cogeneration is another strategy that looks at adaptation and mitigation. I'll talk about cogen shortly. I added this concept of simplicity because I think it's important that we need to look at how much things are costing from a life cycle cost. So not only to purchase something, the capital cost, but how much is it to operate it? And then how much is it to maintain it? And how long will it last? Sometimes we maybe do less of a job at looking at the maintenance, durability, and the longevity of a system. So I think looking at that is important, because there may be something later on in the life cycle that actually the GHGs start to ramp up. So looking at simplicity and how people manage strategies is important as well. In green buildings, if we take a very heavy technology solution that is complex, and we don't have the human resources to manage it, sometimes the GHGs and the energy can drift upwards. So we need to be cognizant of all aspects of how things operate. And in our case at a university, and probably other organizations, we always look at co-benefits like facilities renewal, teaching, research, equity, diversity, inclusion goals, and student engagement. There is another picture of solar PV and a green roof system side by side on top of the design building. And on the design building, the roof drains go to a rainwater cistern, which is using water for rainwater to flush toilets. Karina, what time, do we have any questions? And maybe I'll just check the time. I should probably check the time here. Okay.
It's 10:53 and we don't have any questions yet.
Okay, all right, excellent. Well, feel free to ask any as we go along. Okay, thanks. So here is kind of not anybody's language other than my own. When I was thinking about carbon strategies from a priority point of view, I always try to think back to the principle of simplicity, capture what is already there in a way that considers adaptation. So if it has no moving parts and you can capture something and it has longer life and durability, then we should be thinking about things like passive design, solar orientation, landscape buffering, trees with wind, natural ventilation, and better envelope for buildings. Because if you do all that, well, presumably if you do it well, it's going to last a long time and there's no moving parts. Hopefully less maintenance if you build your envelope well and you do appropriate air, leaky water testing. And so I think that was capture what's already there. The sun is the energy that drives the world. So how can we capture that better? And then the next thought is do more with less. And then I put a little note here that, I feel grateful and have gratitude that we have more than, and we can do more with less. And I do want to recognize the equity of some people may need more around globally. So in our context, though, we can do more with less. So that's the focus on conservation and efficiency, occupant behavior, load matching, using our spaces well, thinking about space utilization, your systems and equipment, cogen. And then finally, eat a different type of food. That's energy product switching. So that's looking at the carbon intensity of your fuels, whether it's what you eat or what your energy systems are using. So, at Dalhousie, we reduced 12,000 tons by going from bunker sea oil to natural gas back in 2011. That was one strategy for a decade. Now we're going to be doing other strategies from there. And so then we need to consider life cycle emissions and criteria air contaminants. Okay, I see we have a question there. Okay, what are the best ways for employees to support sustainability efforts at Dow? Great question. So we do have an employee sustainability leadership program that we run, hopefully going to be every year now. And so I think it'd be great if we'd be happy to engage more employees in that learning opportunity. And then we'll be launching new programs. Karina has been working on a new sustainable events program and different items so we have lots of suggestions of what people can do to reduce paper, electricity in their departments, educate people about waste management. So we have a whole tip sheet and sustainable events guide. So be happy also to receive feedback from employees and others about things that we can work together on. Sometimes we get great suggestions from our employees and they turn into projects, and same with students. So we love to hear your voices on that. Okay, so vision and targets for our new version of our plan. So there's a lot of targets floating out there, and some of the targets that you hear are global in nature, or they may be provincial. They may include everything: transportation, industry, organization, households. So sometimes, how do we know how to hit what target we should hit? All I would say there is that we're trying to be aggressive with our targets. The Canadian target is 30% by 2030. The provincial target is 53% by 2030. Recently, the Halifax HRM modeling set a 75% target by 2030. The IPCC is 45% target by 2030. But I think what we need to recognize is that not every place or people use as much carbon as others. So one could assert, and I think that's what the HRM modeling was suggesting, is we have more of an ability and we have maybe higher carbon fuels that we could reduce more proportionately. So I put a little footnote there, even though by target standards, our target is quite aggressive because we're not talking about carbon offsetting here. We're talking about practical and real changes. That some of our strategies will push us beyond the 2030 goal sooner. And so we are working on that as well. So in terms of our strategies, we've hit about a 20% reduction from our baseline, which is 2009, 2010. A lot of the targets go back, have baselines of 2005. I look back to 2005 to look at the baseline data. It's very similar in terms of how many buildings we had and that kind of things. We use 2009, 2010 because it's when we had most reliable data to do a baseline comparison. So we've hit about 20% reduction. How did we do that? We did that through fuel switching, green building work, so replacing existing buildings with new buildings, upgrading existing buildings, a lot of energy efficiency work. We had some changes in our sustainable transportation, though that's more on scope 3. And up at the agricultural campus, I'll talk about a major district energy project that we did there. So we're doing multiple projects at different levels to get to that 20% reduction. How are we going to get to 55 in the next decade or beyond? I'll talk about some of those strategies. But we have a number of knowledge and behavior strategies around looking at standards, design guidelines, which is really important for an organization when you go to market, that you're quoting the higher level efficiency targets and carbon targets in your design standards, looking how can you use space better and more efficiently, and looking at things like emergency measures and risk planning for climate adaptation. We have done a number of green infrastructure projects related to adaptation, green and white roofs, vegetative swales, rainwater harvesting, pore systems. We've done a number of those, and I'll talk about that. And we've done some research into carbon offsets and things. As I mentioned, our strategy in the next decade, and has been the last decade, is to really use our investment and our money on real changes here to change our grid and our fuels. But ultimately, we will be looking out further on kind of more Nova Scotia-based solutions for carbon offsets. We've done a lot of work on energy, and we have an embedded energy manager from Efficiency Nova Scotia, and we're really pleased to work with Efficiency on that partnership. And we have an energy team and committee with facilities in our office, and we have an EMIS, Energy Management Information System plan. I just put this up. This is from the Canadian Standards ISO standard for energy management, because we kind of do all of these things at DAL, and we've invested in metering in the last decade quite a bit. We have over 242 building level meters, and right now Justin, our energy manager, and myself, and Justin's really digging into the modeling, and facility staff are looking at thermal energy, electricity, and water usage at our buildings as we speak, and doing setback programs. Because we have all that remotely, we can do lots of different modeling remotely and setbacks through the building automation system. So it's a really important way to monitor what's going on and then make changes, troubleshoot, do measurement and verification, find out new program ideas, and going forward. So
Michelle, you have
okay, great. Sure. Okay. So the comment was, we've seen a commitment from Canadian universities to sign the UN Declaration for Climate Change, which makes a commitment to going carbon neutral. UBC, Quebec universities, why has Dal made this formal commitment? This would set a message. So I think, thanks for that, Kent. I think we should look at that, because we may be on track for doing, I think, we look at our peers all the time in terms of what we're doing versus what they're doing. And we do have a carbon neutrality goal, and I think it's very similar to some universities, albeit some other universities have sped up the carbon neutrality goal to be 2040 or 2050. So that's something we'll have a look at and see if we can, make a more formal commitment to, because I think we are doing a number of best practices and making some real change there. What software do we use for energy management? We have building automation systems, and right now we're using Kaizen software systems. So we bring all the meter data into our building automation systems, and then we kick it out to the energy management information system, which is Kaizen. We also use Tableau, which is another software for billing data. All the bills go into our Tableau system, and please have facility staff do programming for us so we can click on data from billing data in that software. And also the ion meters that we use for electricity has their own software system, PME. So we use multiple softwares to look at different granularities of energy data. So our energy and water management program, we do a lot of work here, and there's different ways we approach it. So our sustainability project model, if down in the left corner there, mostly energy and water related. So what we do is we create business cases, and we use the utility savings model. Back to that financing strategy, we create business cases that show utility payback, net present value, also environmental benefits and health and social benefits. We try to apply for that money internally. We don't cap it, so it's not a green and revolving fund. We don't have it capped necessarily. And we also apply for grants, and facilities management may be doing work. So sometimes there's ability to piece in some facilities renewal management money. So how we do that is we kind of work on the planning and the securement of the financing, and then facilities management delivers the work for us with members in the community and the professional community. That's how we are able to move a lot of projects through that model. And then of course, facilities is always doing work on major projects, whether it's a deep retrofit or new construction. We have our office wrote the LEED Gold or higher for new buildings policy in 2010. And so now we're looking at the next level for existing and new construction. What's net zero ready look like? What are we doing now? How can we make those changes? And a lot of work has been done on efficiency standards and controls through the capital projects team in the office. So whether we finance it or it's facilities managers leading it, we're part of the team as an advisor, a partner, or a funder. And that by doing that technique, we were able to move more strategies into regular core business activities plus new projects, and then stimulate more projects through our financing model. Justin and Kyle and other people in facilities in our office are always working on optimization projects. Those are like controls projects, HVAC setbacks, other strategies that save energy. So those are short-term, lower cost projects that optimize different systems. And we have a committee that the planning department provides some funding for projects like recommissioning, and so that works as well. And so we're also very grateful for the support and incentives of the rebates from Efficiency Nova Scotia to help us try to put these business cases together. Okay. So some of the utility projects, we talked about recommissioning. I'm pleasantly surprised at recommissioning. You know, you usually pick a building that has high energy use, that has a lot of controls that you can control through recommissioning or building optimization, but our team has a lot of success in there, and 5 to 20% savings depending on how big your systems are, how big the energy loss is, but it's definitely a good strategy for cost per dollar per ton. We have over 9 solar installations on campus, so I have, a lot of that's about research, understanding, supporting. It's a very small amount of energy just because the scale of the university and the research intensive of our buildings. So, I worked out we'd need 6 land masses of our campus just to create the solar fields for to offset our electricity. So we'll talk about our offsite renewable energy ventures that we're looking at. Campus lighting, no surprise here, going to LED, occupancy sensors in some cases, steam system installations. That's a picture below of extra padding on steam systems. We've done a full campus water fixtures, a lot of water used to cool equipment or research services. So we have a one-of-a-kind research facility at Dal that uses seawater 24 hours a day, and they have to clean sand filters. So done a lot of work with them to recycle potable water, and a number of projects on equipment and systems, and some innovative projects on whole building air leakage testing, water leakage testing, and adding enhancements to triple pane windows and other building envelope features. So a whole series of projects from small, medium, and large. Some of our large projects, with facilities are district energy. So in the last couple of years, we've done a full redo of the district energy system up at the agricultural campus. It was a $27 million project with a biomass cogeneration. So the up at the agricultural campus, it's about 800,000 square feet. They've used biomass for fuel for the last 30 years. So it was at its end of life. It was a steam system. So we got a project there to change from steam to hot water, which was 30% more efficient in the energy loss in the distribution system, the overall system. And then a new biomass heater with a organic Rankine cycle turbine to create electricity, and then the waste heat is used for heating the campus. So electricity produced, which goes to the grid, is about 75% of the load of the campus. It's a 1 megawatt cogen. So we're monitoring that system very closely and always trying to make improvements. We have a phase 2 of that project we're working on as well. The Halifax district heating system is undergoing a renovation with new boilers, new systems, and we're working on a steam to hot water project as well. One of our campuses has already switched to hot water, and we're working on a very large project for other aspects of the district heating system. So since 2010, we have 9 buildings that have LEED silver or gold status, and 2 buildings that hopefully the stretch gold is higher at platinum, but we're working on those. And 2 large deep building retrofits that are about over 700,000 square feet that were multi-million-dollar projects for large lab buildings, the Life Science Center and the Tucker building. So we have videos and presentations on a number of these different initiatives and fact sheets. So if you're interested in a particular project, we can certainly send you more information. On the behavioral side, just Karina, some of the work that Karina's doing, and Tanya and other people in our office is We have a lot of internships. We work with a lot of classes across many faculties from engineering and science and FAS, agriculture, to have students work on initiatives with us. We have a number of different community building events and outreach programs. So in terms of adaptation, did want to talk a little bit about what we've done there. So worked with students in former Environment Canada and climate change staff to do local climate modeling, and we have papers on that that we can share. Created an adaptation workshop to bring in community members and the scientific information, come up with adaptation strategies. And we have a published paper on that in the Journal of Sustainability in Higher Education, if people are interested in the format. We use literature review, GIS slope data to see where we have slopes and erosion, potentially overlaid that with precipitation. Had students look at building data, below grade levels. We have historical maps. We actually managed to find a he's a Dell employee, former student, for his thesis, got historical maps from the UK of stream areas on Dal that are still there. They're just buried to help us with that. And a lot of observational data. So myself, I've been out in rainstorms 10 times looking at two sites in particular. And through that observational approach, we found out some very interesting things that helped us with strategy development. So we ourselves in the municipality have put in hard infrastructure changes to help with adaptation issues of flooding. We've done green roofs, rain gardens. We have a biomass replacement guideline policy where if a tree has to come down for a project, that we replace it with the same amount of biomass. So we've taken down 215 trees and planted over 700 trees in replacement because it's a biomass replacement. The biomass at the agriculture campus, I should note, which is always an important consideration, is a waste residue from a sawmill, so the shavings and bark from a sawmill. That's what it's primarily from, and that sawmill is down the road. And then it's selective harvest. We have a couple of agreements with co-ops for selective harvest chips. So that's the biomass supply chain. And we have a whole supply chain value statement that we can share. Some of the other strategies deployed, we have 3 building rainwater cisterns, and we've done modeling with those, permeable favors and envelope standards, and looking at building durability. So our local climate modeling again, yes?
15 minutes. 15 minutes.
Okay, great. Perfect. Warmer, wetter, wilder, those kind of the highlights. Warmer over the climate period, wetter, and that wilder, that wetness may come down in shorter duration. So high level participation, a shorter period of time causes flooding, more winds, and maybe more extreme drought because when the water comes, it may be coming at a more extreme period. Here's the historical map I mentioned that we were able to get from Mike, that he got from the UK, and that's our Killam Library, and that's the historic river that goes through it that's still there and it's underground. And so understanding the floodplain and increased precipitation, how those work together and your building environment is an important consideration. So we did a adaptation workshop and assessments, and some of our priorities and vulnerabilities are energy infrastructure. So, wires, power coming to campus, our built infrastructure, stormwater systems. We have agricultural lands up at the AC that flood, and other aspects like trees and roadways. For our climate change approach for our strategies, what are we going to do? We already do efficiency projects, green building, on-site renewables. We're looking at off-site renewables through power purchase agreement right now. District energy, steam to hot water, we still have large portion of the Halifax campus to do. Waste heat recovery, the next level of green building adaptation, and then get to carbon neutrality. We need to do all of that, plus low carbon heating, electric fleet, and local carbon offsets. So that's kind of the strategies. This is a little vignette. On the left is a picture I took after 7 times in the rain to find out what's going. Under that water is our rain garden. So obviously the rain garden wouldn't be able to handle that flow. And basically the precipitation events, I was there during the event to capture that. And it basically, our river just came and flooded buildings surrounding it. So our green infrastructure could not handle the volume, and we didn't know the volume until I caught that video. And the solution is to direct it to the street, that kind of volume. So HRM did realign the street, put 2 curb cuts, and then realign the flow of the water to the middle of the street to go down to the harbor. So this is just a kind of lesson of observation that we wouldn't have known the source or how it all came together unless you're kind of always looking at it. Here's a spreadsheet I created for Adaptation Workshop that you could bring in, facility staff, community staff, just to help socialize and get people's input into adaptation working. So we take climate scenarios developed from our climate models, invite people to come to the workshop, and then do a vulnerability and priority assessment, come up with adaptation strategies. Just one of many tools to help come up with focused areas for adaptation. Here's pictures of some of the adaptation strategies. On the top there is permeable pavers that we put through the IDEA project. That was the compacted soil on the left and the drainage. And there's our permeable pavers. We have more details on that if you're interested. The middle picture there is me monitoring the permeable concrete, and it's not doing so well on the overflow. And so after some of that observation, we put in another system that took that rain over to a vegetative berm. So you almost sometimes need 2 or 3 systems, backup systems. So if you're not monitoring it, and maybe permeable concrete wasn't the best solution. Maybe, you need to know the flows and model and energy modeling and stormwater management, larger flows because of what the climate modeling is saying. That's one of our rainwater cisterns. And below is a picture of the evolution of a compacted area, and we turned it into a rain garden on campus. So just back to, organizational checklists, GHG reporting. It's mandatory for central plants at a certain threshold, and facilities does that. And then our office does voluntary. We're not required to do this, but we do ISO standard GHG reports every 3 years. And our targets relate to scope 1 and scope 2. And then we also track scope 3, and our sustainability plan are working on reducing scope 3 and other plans like transportation demand management. So again, our greenhouse gas inventory, it's publicly available. We can send this off to people. It's quite detailed. We do follow the ISO framework, and we are always improving and adding more scope 3 aspects to it. So financing and implementation. In the last decade, we've invested, Dal and other partners, because remember our model uses utility savings, external grants, facilities funding, about $97 million in sustainability projects that we track through a spreadsheet. And then how do we get that next level from 20 to 55 if we're not buying carbon offsets? So some universities have purchased purchased carbon offsets, and that's how you get to carbon neutrality. That's one way you can get to carbon neutrality quicker. And then other ways it's more costly to invest in changes at your campus. So that's the tactic we're taking for the next decade. So some of the ideas here, we'll need another 100 million or so for some of the strategies we talked about, which is steam to hot water, renewable energy power purchase agreements, though you can do them in your operating utility budget. So we're working on that. You know, other new ideas to explore, maybe endowment funds or interest-free loans. So we're looking at different ideas. But what I want to say here too is about the, there's a challenge of capital, debt, resources, and incentives, in the sense that at some point, if your debt is too high, you're not going, even if you could access capital at a low percentage, like 3% interest, people won't take on that debt. So then that becomes a challenge for doing new projects. You also, if you have facilities renewal and deferred maintenance, like roofs, you know, leaking, then there's competing interests for that. And then there's incentives that may be stimulating things, not in a way that will help with that capital debt cycle. So I think there's an opportunity to be strategic about how we invest to make more change on the ground. So one of my favorite things to talk about is student engagement. And over the last number of years, we had a number of students work with us on projects related to our climate change plan, from climate modeling, adaptation planning, helping with the climate change plan, writing, looking at carbon offset options and biomass replacement, life cycle analysis of fuels. So, and then, you know, outside of our office, of course, students are actively involved in their own way and through their student societies and different campaigns they're working on. But directly with us, we've done a lot of great work together. So I mentioned scope 3. We have a number of targets and strategies for water consumption, food waste and diversion, transportation demand management, products, and natural environment. So we are actively working on those and have targets related to those emissions as well. And just a couple of summary thoughts on carbon neutrality. I mean, in my perspective, it's an accounting term that helps us make change. It's an important management tool. It's not a scientific absolute, right? Is anything carbon neutral, but it's an important way for us to look at the issues. When we're thinking about this, I think it's important to look at the life cycle emissions of everything, the local context, and also other impacts of biodiversity and health and equity in particular too. So just kind of my practitioner thoughts on the term. So we're actively working on renewable energy power purchase agreement for offsite renewable energy, and that would be a really great stride for us in terms of our climate change plan. Looking at just thinking on local carbon offset project for business travel. We're still have an aggressive program around energy efficiency, deep retrofits, district energy, looking at building envelope more specifically on skins and air leakage and modeling, and continue our work on natural environment systems. And I put a note there about, I do think there's an opportunity for more sessions with partners like government and funders on how do we use our financing and policy instruments wisely. There is a limited amount of resources, but is there a way to stimulate the right things for the change that needs to happen? So just as a final thought, there's additional resources on our website, green building videos, fact sheets, program guides, programs. And if you have any questions or afterwards, happy to entertain that as well. And I also like to thank all our groups we work with. That, you know, we couldn't do all this, you know, $97 million of work without all the different departments like facilities management, ancillary services, all the different faculties. And then also all our partners in the community who help fund us or who help deliver the projects, like the local building industry and all the different nonprofits. So thank you to everybody there as well. And a final shout out, it is Earth Day today, and Happy Earth Day, I wanted to mention there's this City Nature Challenge going on, and they have a Facebook page. EAC has an Earth Day webinar in the afternoon. Hike Nova Scotia has backyard nature activities. So there's a lot going on today. There's a number of different webinars around the world. And so, yes, just have a great Earth Day. And I think that's it. So any final questions? And Karina, if you had anything you'd like to say as well.
Yeah, there's a question for you in the chat.
Oh, okay.
There's a couple now, actually.
All right, great. Okay, so sustainable nativized lawns. Oh yeah, so yes, I think, we've had conversations with facilities, and we have a few pilot projects where they are not maintaining any lawn environment. There's an ecolab project that's going on to try to change biodiversity around a certain area. So we have small projects, but yes, I think there's more opportunity to do that around lawn. In our natural environment plan, we do talk about different natural environment spaces. So some spaces being open for recreational activity, some spaces to be more go back to nature. So we do, if you look at our natural environment plan, you can kind of see some of those strategies there, but I agree there's an opportunity for more of that. Okay, we had another question. Do you feel supported by your executive leadership? How can we work with our executive team? Yes, we feel supported. We do have financing model was set up with senior administration to do some of that. The board, I present to the board on climate change and sustainability. And I think working with their executive, we talked about, it'd be maybe great to have the president reporting on some of the goals, and we'll have to work with our executive more specifically as we go up to the next level, because we're going to have to implement new changes. So we will have put in ideas that we need to garner their support from, and strategies for announcing carbon neutrality dates or signing up to actions. I think we definitely need to have the executive on board for that. So definitely more to do there. But overall, yes, I think we have general support. Okay, in terms of the organization checklist. So just examples how the Office's sustainability approach list, just to give others a visual idea how this can be implemented. Okay, so yeah, I created the organizational checklist kind of based on what we've done. And when I think about the cogs of change, like how do you actually make change happen? You kind of need policy and plans as a lever, like green building policy, LEED Gold or higher, or climate change plans. You have to have those targets embraced by senior administration. You have to have that public reporting. So we report through STARS. We have a sustainability progress report. We have our GHG report. And then you have to have the financing mechanism. So back to our utility savings model, financing model. Now we have to explore new ones given the scale of what we need to do. So those are kind of the presentation was kind of structured on that. Be happy to provide more examples from that. Does the office have involvement with on-campus food policy? Yes, so there is a healthy and sustainable food framework at the university. It was published in 2016 with ancillary services and some other groups on campus. So it does have targets around plant forward approach, and you'll see there about increasing that. It's something we discussed with food services, and it's something that they're making changes on. So we do track local organic or third-party certification, trying to track more on humane standards and plant forward and carbon intensity. So food waste, looking at plant forward programs. Okay, another question here. How do we engage employees, faculty, and students spiritually engaging sustainability? Yes, how do we promote spiritual connections to nature on campus? Yeah, I think we definitely could do more of that. And there are some small projects going on with the Eco Lab and faculty involved in trying to create medicine wheels. We have a small project with the Friendship Center around putting in more sweet grasses for them to use. Have some conversations with the agricultural campus about planting more black ash, which is a spiritual and important species for the Mi'kmaq. So I think we need to do more of that. And it's definitely on our agenda to incorporate equity, diversity, inclusion, and Indigenous knowledge more. So some small measures, but definitely more to do. And as a practical, I think we can use our natural landscapes and biodiversity as certainly a teaching tool and modeling, and have more art and representation in buildings. So if you look at our new design building, we had 2 art pieces commissioned for the green building features of that building, including a montage of Black history related to the local community, and Mi'kmaq sculpture hanging in the design building of the medicine wheel. So is there a way to access modeling management software that you've mentioned through their presentation, or is something you have to purchase? Right. So some of the modeling tool for climate modeling is free-ish. You can probably get an OK climate model through existing software. The other management software we talked about, Kaizen or IntelliWeb or Tableau, they do have a cost to it in a subscription. There's things like the Energy Star Building Portfolio Manager that are free that you can use. So there is some free software. It depends on what level and you're at and how you use the data. Where we have so much 15-minute interval data, we use more sophisticated software for decision making, but there are some free tools for more high-level data. Okay. And lastly, can you talk about employee behavioral change in support of your strategy? Any initiatives, incentives, commitments to reduce employee travel? Yes. So we do, one of the slides there talked about our employee behavioral programs. It was back a little further under the Rethink Campus banner. So those are kind of the programs that we're deploying. Employee travel is something I think I mentioned in our slide we're just starting to work on now. I have to set up a call with a couple of universities to talk about a program there. My thought there is if we can create an employee travel program that has local carbon offsets with equity, diversion, inclusion targets in the community, that would be a real benefit for multiple reasons. So that's something we're just starting on. One of our challenges to date has been we believe we haven't had a good handle on our travel data because it isn't in electronic format. That is happening right now. Once we have that electronic data and access to that data, that'll give us a better opportunity to quantify the carbon impacts and create a financing model for offsets. So thank you so much for your interest and your ideas and your thoughts. We are continuing to work on a number of these strategies, and there's definitely room for improvement as we go forward. And take a couple of your comments and noted those for continual work. So thank you so much and have a happy Earth Day.
Thank you so much for joining, everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to email them to rethink@dal.ca and we can get those to Rochelle. Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day.